My name is Rheya Marlow. I am 47 years old, and for 20 years I was the quiet mind behind a logistics system that kept half of Austin running. I was never the one giving speeches or shaking hands at ribbon cuttings. I was the one fixing the code at 3 in the morning while the executives slept. The morning it all fell apart began like any other until my phone lit up. Dozens of alerts stacked on the screen: shipment delays, failed logins, warehouse cancellations. Then came the first call. A vendor shouting that the company portal had locked him out. A minute later, another, and another. By the time the fourth call came, I could already picture the panic inside Hartley Logistics' glass tower. Then his name appeared. Charles Hartley, my CEO. My former CEO. I answered. Rheya, he said, breathless, his voice shaking under the weight of something he didn't yet understand. This is ridiculous. What did you do? Our servers are frozen. The investors are calling. I'll sue you if I have to. I closed my eyes and let the sound of his fury settle over me like static. For years, I had heard that same tone, commanding, certain, entitled, but this time it trembled. Charles, I said softly, you really should have read page 12. Silence. Only the faint hum of the city outside my window, the heartbeat of Austin waking up to chaos. Somewhere downtown, alarms were flashing red across monitors, passwords were being reset, and Leo, the golden boy he'd chosen to replace me, was probably realizing he didn't even have clearance to restart the system. I hung up before Charles could answer. The calls kept coming, each one louder, more desperate. I turned the phone face down on the table. For the first time in years, I felt calm. 24 hours earlier, I had sat across from him in the executive lounge, a contract between us and that patient smile of his, hiding what he thought was control. Now, the city pulsed with the cost of his arrogance. I poured myself another cup of coffee. Steady hands, steady breath, and waited for Austin to understand what one signature had set in motion. 2 days earlier, I stood at the tall glass doors of the executive lounge, the one overlooking Lake Austin where Charles liked to play mentor. The air always smelled like roasted coffee and control. He looked up from his laptop with that easy smile he practiced for investors. Rheya, he said, rising just enough to appear polite. You've been with us since the beginning, 20 years. That's loyalty no one can buy. He gestured toward the chair across from him. Sit. You deserve to relax for once. I sat, and he poured me a cup of coffee, as if caffeine could soften what was coming. I've been thinking about your next chapter, he began. You've built something extraordinary with NextGrid. It's time we prepare for the future. He slid a manila folder toward me. The sound of it against the table was sharp. Final. I didn't open it. The future, I said. Or Leo's promotion. Charles chuckled, low and deliberate. Let's not frame this as replacement. Think of it as mentorship. You'll guide him for a few months, then step back. He'll take over, but your benefits stay intact. Full pension, full recognition. Recognition I asked. Without authorship, he leaned forward, lowering his voice like we were conspirators. You've earned your rest. Rheya, you don't want to die at your desk. Let the next generation build on your legacy. Leo's sharp. He just needs your structure. I finally opened the folder. The contract inside was elegant, ruthless. My name was reduced to a line item above Leo's. You wrote this, I said. He smiled. I supervised it. Legal handled the wording. Sign today, and I'll personally guarantee every dollar of your retirement package. You'll still be part of the family. I met his eyes and saw nothing paternal there, just calculation dressed as kindness. I'll read it tonight, I said quietly, closing the folder. I don't sign anything I don't understand. He nodded, relieved. Good. I knew you'd see it my way. I smiled back, but only with half my face. You have no idea how closely I'll be reading. That night, my apartment was quiet except for the hum of my old desktop and the rain tapping against the window. The contract sat open on my screen. Polite and poisonous. Charles's words still echoed. You've earned your rest. I started reading line by line. The language was flattering at first, full of corporate affection. All benefits retained, full pension guaranteed. Then came the technical sections, where truth liked to hide. Clause 19. All proprietary rights to the next grid framework shall transfer to successor management upon the departure of current director. There it was. The erasure tucked between words like transition and continuity. I leaned closer, tracing the sentence with my cursor. For 2 decades, I had built every algorithm, every safety protocol, every redundant server lock inside NextGrid. Without me, they had nothing but wires and blind faith. I printed the document and marked it up in red pen, rewriting one line with care. The words were small enough to slip past anyone who skimmed ownership of intellectual property shall remain with the original creator, whose certification remains valid beyond succession. It was legal, clean, subtle, final. I cross-checked the phrasing with old templates from the patent filing I had done years before. The company lawyers would never notice it looked like compliance jargon, but that one sentence meant the license servers, the encryption keys, and every authentication layer in NextGrid would still recognize my signature alone. By midnight, I was calm. I retyped the amendment neatly, merged it into the final document, and saved the file under the same name. When I printed it, the pages smelled faintly of toner and freedom. I signed slowly. Not out of hesitation, but precision. My name flowed across the paper with the steadiness of a woman who'd spent too many years fixing what others broke. The next morning, I placed the folder on my desk at work, sealed and ready. Charles would see the signature and assume victory. But I knew better. I had left one truth inside his illusion, the kind written so quietly it only screamed once you lost everything. Leo Hartley arrived on a Tuesday morning with the kind of energy that fills a room before he even speaks. He wore sneakers that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage and carried a tablet like a badge of royalty. I was in the server room when he appeared in the doorway, all grin and charm. "So you're the legend," he said. "Dad told me you built this dinosaur from scratch." "Dinosaur?" I asked, not looking up from the monitor. "Legacy system," he corrected quickly, though the smirk stayed. "Don't worry, I'll modernize it. Cloud-based, AI integrated, scalable buzzword compliant." Charles stepped in behind him, his voice warm with pride. "He's eager to learn from the best. Then I suggest he starts with humility," I said quietly. Charles chuckled, pretending not to notice the edge in my tone. "Let's keep this transition smooth. Rheya, I've told Leo to shadow you for a few weeks before we finalize access." Leo crossed his arms. "Do I really need supervision? I've been coding since I was 12. I finally met his gaze. "And I've been keeping this company alive since before you finished high school." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Charles clapped Leo on the shoulder, dismissing the tension. "Rheya, just hand over your credentials. The rest we can manage internally." I reached into my folder and slid a small envelope across the table. Inside were printed credentials, access guidelines, and one black USB drive. "Everything you'll need," I said. Charles smiled, relieved. "You've always been professional." Leo took the envelope like a trophy. "Thanks, Rheya. I'll make it better. I'm sure you will," I replied, my voice calm, even kind. When I stepped into the parking lot, the Texas sun was sharp and blinding. I looked back once through the glass walls, father and son standing over my system like kings examining a throne. I started the car, hands steady on the wheel. Behind me, the company I had built hummed under new management, and for the first time, I didn't stay to protect it. It didn't take long for Leo to make his mark. 24 hours after taking full access to NextGrid, he sent out a company-wide memo titled Optimization Day. The message was bright, bold, and painfully confident. Legacy code cleanup begins at noon. By 3 o'clock, the first warehouse called. 2 identical shipments had been dispatched to the same client, one billed, one unpaid. At 4, accounting discovered a chain of missing payments. By 5, Customer service lines were full of complaints. I was home when the first text came from Heather, one of the junior engineers. "Did you change the core directory?" "The system keeps rejecting admin commands." I replied, "No, I haven't touched it since yesterday." 10 minutes later, the phone rang. It was Charles. His tone was steady, but I could hear the strain underneath. "Minor hiccup," he said. "Leo's fixing it. Probably a migration error." "Which environment did he use?" I asked. "The live one. He said it'd be faster." I almost laughed. "You let him rewrite production code without a sandbox." He exhaled sharply. "We all have to modernize sometime. Rheya, investors like to see momentum." The next sound was Leo, shouting faintly in the background. "Why won't it authenticate? It's looping back." Charles lowered his voice. "He says it's your old encryption key. Can you give him override permission?" I smiled to myself, though he couldn't see it. "You already did. Remember, the new admin key is tied to your authorization. Try logging in under your account." He paused. I heard frantic typing, a muffled curse. Then, "It says owner ID Rheya Marlow." "Yes," I said softly. "That's correct. Fix it," he snapped. "We're bleeding money by the hour. I can't fix what isn't broken." "Charles." The silence on the line stretched, heavy and raw. Then he hung up. I set my phone down and stared out the window. Austin's skyline blinked in the distance, beautiful, distant, untouchable. Somewhere downtown, their perfect plan was unraveling, one duplicated shipment at a time. By morning, half the company was in emergency mode. Legal, IT, and operations filled the conference rooms, screens glowing red with system errors. From what I heard later, the same phrase echoed across every department like a curse: "Access denied." Charles called me just before noon. His voice was soft at first, the way he always sounded when he wanted something. "Rheya? Good morning. We've hit a small glitch in the transition. Leo's trying to reset the credentials, but the servers are being stubborn. Could you log in remotely? Just for a minute." I leaned back in my chair, coffee cooling beside me. "You signed me out. Remember, it was part of the transition." A pause. "Well, yes. But this is temporary, just until the system recognizes the new credentials. You'll still have your benefits." Of course. He still thought the same promises could buy me back. "Charles," I said, steady and quiet. "You don't need me to log in. You just need to read your own contract." His charm cracked. "We don't have time for games. The investors are calling every 5 minutes. If you cared at all about this company, I cared enough to build it so it couldn't be stolen in a single afternoon." He exhaled through his teeth. Behind him, I heard Leo shouting orders, keyboards clattering, the sound of panic spreading. "Fine," he said finally, low and furious. "You want to play hardball? We'll get legal to override your permissions." "Good luck," I said, and hung up. By 2. The messages began rolling in. Heather, the junior engineer, Mark from compliance, even someone from HR. "It keeps rejecting every login. All tokens invalid. Even root access won't work." Somewhere inside that glass building, Charles was learning that charm had an expiration date, and arrogance had a cost. I set my phone face down again and opened my laptop. For the first time in years, I didn't log into NextGrid. I simply watched as the empire I had built began to teach its new owners the price of not listening. By the second afternoon, they had called in the compliance director, a sharp woman named Irene Park, who never smiled unless a clause demanded it. I had worked with her once, years ago, when NextGrid was still a prototype. She understood contracts better than most lawyers, and I knew that if anyone could uncover what I had done, it would be her. Later, I heard how it unfolded from one of the engineers who still respected me. The entire executive team sat around the oval conference table, waiting for Irene to explain why nothing in their multi-million-dollar system could move without my approval. She stood at the front of the room with a stack of documents and her reading glasses perched halfway down her nose. Clause 34, she said. Ownership of intellectual property shall remain with the original creator, whose certification remains valid beyond succession. Charles frowned. That can't be right. The transfer agreement, she cut him off gently, was signed under that condition. The amendment is initialed in your handwriting. Leo slammed his hands on the table. She tricked you. You let her keep the keys. Irene didn't flinch. Mr. Hartley, the system's operating license is tied to her biometric ID. That includes fingerprint, voice, and facial recognition. Until she willingly reassigns it, no one can alter or replace the certification without voiding all functionality. Charles's face drained of color. So what you're saying is I'm saying, Irene replied, calm and final, that your company is currently running under her authority. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Leo stormed out, muttering something about obsolete engineers and lawyers who ruin progress. The door hit the frame so hard it echoed. Charles sat back in his chair, the weight of his own signature pressing against him. How long before we can fix this? He asked. Irene gathered her files. That depends. You might want to ask her. That evening, my phone buzzed again. Same caller, same silence. I didn't answer. The call came just after midnight. I didn't answer, but I let it play through the voicemail. Charles's voice was raw, no longer polished. Rheya, please. The board's in session. We need you to undo this. Leo made a mistake. We can fix it if you just... The recording cut off mid-sentence. By then, word had spread through Austin's tech circuit. Investors were pulling out before sunrise. Contracts were on hold. Deliveries frozen. Clients demanding refunds for millions in goods they couldn't track. Inside the tower, the board gathered in the top-floor conference room. I later heard the story from Heather, who stayed late in compliance. The meeting started with blame and ended with panic. Charles paced the room, sleeves rolled up, shouting orders that no one could execute, restore the backups he barked. Leo stood by the window, pale, clutching a tablet. I deleted them, he whispered. What I thought they were redundant. I needed space to recompile the test version. Charles slammed his fist on the table. You deleted 20 years of work, Leo's voice broke. You said you trusted me, for the first time. Charles had nothing to say. Irene, the compliance director, slid a single paper across the table. Mr. Hartley, the company is already in breach of its vendor contracts. Without the certified system key, all operational rights revert to Ms. Marlow. It's written here under your own signature, guaranteeing all benefits retained. Charles read it in silence. His pen had sealed the deal days ago, confident and unchallenged. He sank into his chair, eyes blank. Everything we built, he murmured. No, Irene corrected. Everything she built. By dawn. The screens in the control center flickered once and went black. The city outside kept moving, trucks still on the highway, planes still in the air but inside that glass tower. The heartbeat of Hartley Logistics stopped. I poured my morning coffee as the first light touched the window. The silence that followed wasn't revenge. It was consequence. By the time the headlines hit, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Hartley Logistics collapses overnight. Former engineer tied to patent lockout. Every outlet had its version of the story, each one painting me as either a genius or a villain. I didn't bother correcting them. Both versions were true in their own way. That afternoon, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was smooth, confident, and unmistakably Texan. Ms. Marlow, this is Samuel Bright from Vector Line in Dallas. We heard what happened in Austin. We'd like to make a proposal. I'm listening, I said. We've been trying to build something similar to NextGrid for 2 years, he continued. After today, your clients will need stability. If you're willing to rebuild under a new name, we'll fund it. You'll lead, full autonomy, full credit. I stared at the blank screen of my laptop, the faint reflection of my face looking steadier than I felt. You want me to bring your company what you couldn't build yourselves. He didn't deny it. We want to give you the freedom to do it right. For a moment, I said nothing. Then I asked, "And if I do? What's in it for the next woman who sits in my chair 20 years from now?" Samuel hesitated. "What do you mean, I mean?" I said. "If I join, Vectorline will establish annual scholarships for women in systems engineering. Real funding, real mentorship. That's the price." He paused, then laughed softly. "You drive a hard bargain. Ms. Marlow. Done." By evening, a headline flashed across every business feed: "Former engineer partners with Vectorline to rescue supply chain clients." The story spread faster than the collapse ever had. I closed my laptop and exhaled. The air felt lighter, almost new. Freedom didn't come free, but for the first time in decades, I was the one setting the cost. The morning after the headlines, the city was quiet. I sat by the window of my apartment overlooking Lake Austin, the same view I'd stared at for years while debugging code that kept other people's empires alive. Now, mine was finally still. My phone buzzed once. I almost ignored it until I saw his name, Charles Hartley. I answered. His voice was rough, stripped of its polish. "Rheya, Charles, I just got off a call with the board," he said. "They're dissolving the company. Investors pulled everything overnight." He hesitated, breath shaking. "You won. Congratulations. I wasn't competing with you." He let out a humorless laugh. "Then, what was this revenge?" "No," I said quietly. "It was a correction." The line went silent for a long moment. I could hear him breathing, the sound of a man realizing how far the fall really was. "You could have told me," he said finally. "You could have warned me." "I did," I replied. Page 12. He groaned softly, like the words hurt. "You didn't have to take everything." "Rheya, I didn't take anything," I said. "You gave it away when you stopped listening." Another pause. Heavier this time. "Leo's leaving the country," he muttered. "Says he needs time to think. I can't even blame him. I hope he learns." I said, "That's more than you ever gave me." He exhaled, broken and small. "I never thought you'd walk away. I warned you I'd read the fine print." He didn't answer again, only the soft click of the call ending. I set the phone down and looked at my desk. The framed copy of that contract sat beside my laptop, open to the page that started it all. My red pen marks glowed faintly under the morning light. Outside, the sun climbed over the lake, turning the water the same shade of copper and gold as the company's old logo. For once, I didn't think about deadlines or access keys or the weight of keeping everything running. I just watched the light move across the surface and let it be enough.